Okay, I want to get right into this. So, there is a such thing called the Black conscious community. And so, what has happened recently in the wee hours of the morning, there was a young lady that was talking about a particular individual and that she pulled his police record. So, she pulled his police record up and found out that he has a history of fraud. And he has several businesses that he opened and several that had been closed. And there was one that had been closed that he's still using, and he's taking money from Black people out of the so called Black conscious community. And so, what has happened more recently? There have been people who have taken to social media and they have PayPal accounts, they have YouTube accounts. This is not everyone. Let me repeat, this is not everyone. This is not all people who are involved in this particular community. So I believe where this whole thing came from is what was called the Black conscious movement. And so pretty much you have these new people or new key players who call themselves a part of a Black conscious community. And so a lot of times they'll have like podcasts, they'll have books, they'll have documentaries, they'll claim that they're going to do small projects and then bigger projects. So some of the conspiracies or the things that have happened, which turned up to be true, is we had one individual who claimed that they wanted to build a school for Black boys and girls. And they set up a GoFundMe page and they were receiving donations in the sums of thousands or more. And so they actually never really got any school off the ground. They started off where they had offers for something a little smaller, but that wasn't good enough for them. So they never actually completed that project. Not saying that they won't ever do it, but their whole ideology was not to have white people involved in it. They were extremely militant about the project. And so a lot of Black people put money into this individual because the person has a gift for gab. He's good at speaking, does public speaking events, and he won't show up to a public speaking event unless you pay him. And so what has happened in the Black community has created a lot of social divide among certain political or conscious community leaders in terms of Black conscious community. So there's been a warring of words, a warring of individuals back and forth. And so this one individual, he even had some words to say about a famous individual who's a basketball player I won't name, who actually did open a school up and was able to complete a project. And he's inclusive of everyone. He doesn't shut the door on people based on race and what have you. But he actually completed a project and he actually done something that benefits many people. And so this one individual had some ill words to say, I'm sure, about the whole issue. It's a possibility because they weren't able themselves to get their own project off the ground. So anyway, some of that might be because of the fact that this person is inclusive of all people, because this one individual said that he wanted a school, so it was just solely for Black people alone, pretty much to segregate individuals. And so he's extremely militant. His talks are militant, and he has a militant stance. A lot of this comes in wake of a lot of the tragedies that have happened more recently with police brutality, Freddie Gray, Trayvon Martin, some of the other issues that have happened, Philando Castile, Sandra Bland, a whole host of incidences that have happened within recent span of months, years, that have taken place that have kind of rocked the Black community in such a way where a lot of people are concerned about their safety, their well-being, and the state of Black community or Black America. And so it doesn't sit well with all Black people as a collective, seeing Black people being gunned down and killed. But what has been really rather divisive as with all that happening, certain predators within our community hone in on those issues, and the the feelings, the emotions run high, and people use that as a time to take money out of the Black community from people who are naive or people who are emotional about some of the tragedies that have happened or are taking place more recently. And so that has not sit well in the Black community. And so what has also happened, there's been gender warring, people fighting over who's doing what, who's responsible, who's not responsible. So there's been individuals that have set up channels, set up videos, that have set up groups, and that have blamed Black women for the demise of the Black community. And so there have been multiple videos, people, individuals who will do talks, and they will say things that don't sit well with Black community as a whole, and it pretty much brings more social divide. And so what has recently been said by this one other individual who claims that he's standing on the front lines for Black people and fighting for Black people, his statements were specifically that Black men should only receive reparations and single Black women don't deserve reparations, and there should be a plot of land tax-free for only Black male-led households. And so he's been selling these type of talks online more recently, and also earlier who was caught with a stripper, and he claimed that most of the money that he used that for the stripper, that the stripper took the money from him, it was for building the school for the Black boys and girls. And so he set up a GoFundMe page, and he was receiving thousands of dollars for Black people who were really dead. So it has raised a lot of concern. And so what I thought was more of a concern is that this one individual was using a fraudulent business and an assumed name, and he's still receiving payments from Black people who are supporting his podcast or his show that he airs online regularly. And so there's a lot of stuff going on, and I don't think even YouTube knows about it, or they haven't actually investigated enough. They don't know enough about it because the people are very sly, they're very cunning. They have good speaking skills, and they're either self-taught or they're educated to some degree. Some of them aren't. They're just using ways of conning people out of their money, basically. They're exploiting the Black community. We also have people that are in politics that also damage the Black community because they, instead of being for Black community, they're against Black communities. So they'll say a lot of disparaging remarks and comments. Some of them are commentators, some of them are on TV shows, or they're on mainstream media like MSNBC and CNN and a whole list of other shows, and they pretty much are far right extremist Black people who have also gone against the grain of the Black community as well and done some damage. So what I wanted to get on is, more recently, I have attempted to do this video in a way where the one guy, he said that white women were suffering more than Black females, and that white women, this is his remarks, and so I'm basically going on what he had said, that Black women actually voted before white women did. And so I had pulled that up earlier. Voting, and I'm going to pull that up here. Okay, so you might have seen this earlier. I tried to attempt to do this. So anyway, this is Black women's suffrage. There's a Black women's suffrage. And so this right here is Ida B. Wells. And so I was trying to bring it to here. So women won the right to vote in 1920. That was white women. Native American women couldn't vote until 1924, and Asian women couldn't vote until 1952. And Black women did not obtain the right to vote until 1964. but women did not turn out to the polls in the same numbers as men did until 1980. And so that was a flat out lie. The guy, he said that white women were oppressed more than black females and that white women didn't vote before black females. So that tells you right there in a nutshell. And also he said that that is the reason why there was a white woman's feminism and a white woman's suffrage, and there wasn't a black woman's suffrage. And so there was a black woman's suffrage, black female suffrage. And I want, even though they're black females, there are some of them who are supporting these men in their movement, even though they have wished death to black women. And they feel that black women are the cause for the demise of the black community, which is very problematic in and of itself. So this right here tells you that there was an African American women's suffrage. Okay, so as women's suffrage movement gained popularity through the so African American women dealt not only with the sexism of being withheld the rights to vote, also racism of white suffragists, which are white women as well. So white women were not oppressed more than black females. It was black females who were oppressed by white women's suffrage, and black females were looked at as subhuman. They weren't even viewed as human. And so I did read that somewhere else as well. So I just wanted to go over that because this guy, he was really going on one. So some of the key players in NAACP women's suffrage, Ida B. Wells women's suffrage, voting rights timeline shows this. What year were black people allowed to vote? And there's a whole thing behind that as well. And so I think I had looked that up as well. So there was a whole thing about voting rights and okay. I don't know if this is what I pulled up before. I don't think so. But anyway, the reason why I'm getting into this is because there's so much information that is misconstrued and that has gone around in these quote unquote consciousness communities that has created a lot of social divide and it's created a lot of problems and a lot of warring of words. And it has gone to the point to where now black conscious community individuals are outing each other, basically outing each other's police records. They're exposing one another, and they're, you know, showing actual police records of some of these people who claim to be leading the front lines for the black community, which is really disturbing. And so I don't know if black people have seen some of these police records that have actually legitimately been pulled. And so Voting Rights Act of 1965. And so there's a whole history, even just with black people alone and the atrocities and the things that they had to go through. So Voting Rights Act of 1965 was signed into law by President Lyndon B. Johnson, aimed to overcome legal barriers at the state and local levels that prevented African Americans from exercising their right to vote as guaranteed under the 15th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. So the Voting Rights Act is considered one of the most far-reaching pieces of civil rights legislation in U.S. history. So that movie Selma talks about it. And so Selma to Montgomery March Lyndon B. Johnson assumed the presidency in November of 1963 upon assassination of John F. Kennedy. So the presidential race in 1964, Johnson was officially elected in a landslide victory and used this mandate to push for legislation he believed would improve the American way of life, such as stronger voting laws or voting right laws. So after the Civil War, the 15th Amendment ratified 1870 prohibited states from denying a male citizen the right to vote based on race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Nevertheless, in the ensuing decades, various discriminatory practices were used to prevent African Americans, particularly those in the South, from exercising their right to vote. During the Civil Rights Movement, there may be a video attached to this, so I'm sorry about that. If you do hear a video, I wasn't meant to show a video. But anyway, it goes on to talk about the whole history behind some of the problems that people have had with voting as an African American. And so I know some people already know about this, but some of the ways that some of these people have been talking, they made it seem as though white women had it easy. And that is the contrary. When you read more into this, during the civil rights movement between 1950s and 1960s, voting right activists in the South were subjected to various forms of mistreatment and violence. So one event that outraged many Americans occurred March 7th, 1965, when peaceful participants in the Selma to Montgomery March for voting rights were met by Alabama state troopers who attacked them with nightsticks, tear gas, whips, and other forms of harassment after they refused to turn back. So some protesters were severely beaten and bloodied, and others ran for their lives. The incident was captured on national television. So in wake of the shocking incident, Johnson called for comprehensive voting rights legislation. In a speech to a joint session of Congress, March 15, 1965, the president outlined the devious ways in which election officials denied African American citizens the vote. So there were literacy tests. Blacks attempting to vote often were told by election officials that they had gotten the date, time, or polling place wrong, that they possessed insufficient literacy skills, or that they had filled out the application incorrectly. Blacks whose population suffered a rate of high illiteracy due to the centuries of oppression and poverty often would be forced to take literacy tests, which they sometimes failed. Johnson also told Congress that voting officials, primarily in the southern states, had been known to force Black voters to recite the entire Constitution or explain the most complex provisions of the state law, a task most white voters would have been hard-pressed to accomplish. In some cases, even Blacks with college degrees were turned away from the polls. So Voting Rights Act signed into law, Voting Rights Bill was passed in the U.S. Senate by 77 to 19 vote, May 26, 1965. So after debating the bill for more than a month, the U.S. House of Representatives passed the bill by a vote of 333 to 85 on July 9th. So Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act into law on August 6, 1965, with Martin Luther King Jr. and other civil rights leaders present at the ceremony. So the act banned the use of literacy tests, provided for federal oversight of voter registration in areas where less than 50% of the non-white population had not registered to vote, and authorized the U.S. Attorney General to investigate the use of poll taxes in the state of local elections. So in 1964, the 24th Amendment made poll taxes illegal in federal elections. Taxes in state elections were banned in 1966 by the U.S. Supreme Court. And so there are some conscious leaders, claim to be leaders, who have been telling Black people who don't read or don't know history or don't pick up a book that white women have suffered more, and white women had the feminism and a women's suffrage, and black women don't have a suffrage. There's no black woman feminism, and that black single women destroyed the black community. Death to all black women is what these people have been spouting on their uh, videos to the black community, to belittle black females. And so this is what has been going on constantly. And so these are some of the key players, or some of the individuals who claim to be a part of the conscious community that have not really been very very much as supportive as some people thought they would be. And so a lot of people are really concerned about these individuals, because what has been stated is some of these individuals have robbed the black community, or they fight a lot, they feud, they war with each other, they can't get along. And so a lot of the topics have come out about money and black power and black buying power, and patronizing black businesses. And so a lot of these individuals have come out and spoke on these issues, but you have yet to see a black school. You have yet to see some of these black businesses actually thrive. And some of these individuals turn out to not really be genuine with all of the things they claim they set out to do in terms of bettering the black community. So there's been a lot of back and forth fighting. Some of these individuals have war of words with one another. Come to find out that some of these individuals have taken money from the black community, and they have actually not built any school, or they've not done anything in reference to building or uplifting in a positive manner black community. And there's been also a lot of males that won't own up to the fact that men also hold a responsibility to raising children. It is not just the female's job alone. Some of these men have, it's not all of them now. There's a few that have been in there that have abandoned their responsibilities, so they get angry about the issues surrounding child support, or having to be a father and stay and raise kids. So they blame the black female if things don't turn out right, or they're in a relationship and maybe they're not serious, and then they abandon the woman and they make it all her fault. So they go online and they wage war, and they create this gender divide. And so they basically try to influence other men or other males to rally behind them, and some of the fighting. And so it gets worse and worse and worse, and it has created a lot of social divide within the black community. It's caused a lot of fighting and a war of words. There have been some people who have actually showed documents of police records of people who claim to be a part of this conscious community, and they're taking money from people and donations, and they're saying they have a legitimate business open when it really isn't open. And so what was concerning is that some of these individuals claim that they have a legitimate campaign. And so what they've been doing is taking money out of donations through PayPal or a YouTube account, or through GoFundMe pages, or they have people actually sending them money. And these people think that they're going to build something, or they're going to create something now. However, there have been some people who have written books. There's some people who have actually produce some information that is useful. Then there's others that haven't done anything. They basically lived off just the words of what they've been promising people, and they never actually follow through or carry out what their projects are, be it small or larger. And so they pretty much are riding on the coattail of the emotions of black people who are enraged and angry at some of the tragedies that we've had, some of the racial issues that have pretty much plagued the black community, with some of the online issues that have come up, police brutality, the Trayvon Martin, Philando Castile, Sandra Bland, on down the list, Freddie Gray, some of the things that have happened that legitimately have, as a collective of people as a whole, have really concerned us in the Black community. So a lot of times they'll have these little groups, they'll have these little talks, and they'll get people riled up. And some people really do want to help, while others use it as an opportunity to steal money from Black people who are naive. And so you have some women who rally behind these men, unsuspecting, not knowing that some of these same males are the ones who are stating that they want to see Black females murdered. And so they have said this in so many words. There have been some that have been saying they were wishing death to Black females. And so I don't know why they haven't caught some of these predators. Maybe they haven't gotten around to them yet, or they haven't actually really made enough attempts to find out what's really going on. But it is pretty prevalent, and it is really problematic. My suggestion to you is to be careful who you follow, ask questions. It's nothing wrong with asking questions before you send money to anybody. Find out if the business is legitimate. Don't send money to people who you don't really know. And like this right here is stating, conscious community is just entertainment. You got some people who really aren't really going to do anything. They're basically just selling you words. And so they're not really going to actually better the Black community. What they've been doing is they've been pilfering, and they've been stealing from the Black community. And so they've been taking people's emotions and robbing them out of their wallet. And they've been filling their wallets and their bank accounts. So just be careful of who you follow or whom you follow, and investigate. Find out if they're really credible. Be careful, because a lot of this is going on. Some people are genuine. You have to weed out which ones are real and which ones aren't. And so it's not about what they say, it's more about what they do that speaks louder than the words alone. So with that being said, I'm going to let this video go. Hopefully this went through. I'm hoping so. But anyway, thanks for listening.